Hello there and welcome back once more to Module 4, and we're now in lesson number 5, and this one is going to be a fairly, well, it could be fairly long, and it's going to be a little bit of homework for you at the end of it as well. So I know you're all very excited about the homework aspect. So let's just get started here. Moving forward, what I'm wanting you to achieve out of this, part of what I want you to achieve out of this program, is that every time you look at a deal in the future, you're going to start to ask yourself, what else could I do with this? What are my options? Whether they be buy and hold, buy, fix, and sell, whether you're going to assign it and flip it, or perhaps you'll look at lease options in the future. Now, this could be if you already own the property and you need an exit strategy because the market conditions have changed, or you got yourself involved in a bad deal from the very beginning. Now you need to look at how to improve it, how to get out of it, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of programs out there, mine included, that provide you a lot of education. And people have the mindset or belief that knowledge is power. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that, because you can have all the knowledge in the world, but until you actually start to apply it, that's when it becomes of any use or value to you. Now, applied knowledge is great. And as I can attest myself, as an individual by myself, having the knowledge is fantastic. Starting to apply it is great. But what really helped me was when I added a little bit more to this equation. And what I added was some creative thinking. Now, you can add your own source of creative thinking as well. But what can really take this off for you is when you add some, I'm going to say, rocket fuel, and you actually start a mastermind group, especially a mastermind group of not just like-minded people, but like-minded people in the same industry. So if you're working with other real estate investors and you brainstorm about different ideas, how to accomplish things, that's when things are really going to take off for you, and you'll start to see some fantastic results. So let's take a look at an example of a young family. They're the first-time home buyers, and this is a big struggle for them. So when I was a realtor out west, our brokerage was focusing on investors. However, we were still selling to the general market as well. And I found myself creating a niche where I was attracting and servicing first-time home buyers, young families, and just getting out in the market. The market that we were in was definitely a bit overheated, and the average house price was $300,000, which means that for the first-time home buyers, they're going to need a down payment, a minimum of $15,000, as much as $30,000 to get into this, which is a stretch for most first-time home buyers unless they have family members helping them out. And then they have a mortgage of $270,000, so that means their pity payment, which is your principal and interest, and that's your mortgage, taxes and insurance, is going to be at least $1,650. So it was very disheartening for a lot of first-time home buyers. So that's where I came up with the idea to help them out, and that was looking at a different model for their first-time home buyer. So let's just run through an example here. So a single-family house, $300,000. Our pity payment is $1,650. The fair market rent for a house like that is $1,500. Now, this young family, they can afford the $1,500 barely, but that's all they can afford, and then they don't have a down payment. And again, what they're going to need is $15,000 to $30,000 to purchase this home in the future. So what if we look at this a little bit differently? What if we find a house that either is suited, or we can suite the basement and rent that out to a tenant? So the young family lives upstairs, they rent out the basement for $800. They can take this $800 and they can apply that towards the purchasing of the house. So it can help pay the rent initially, and we could do a lease option to them. They could have their family, not give them the whole $30,000, but perhaps the family gives them $5,000 to $10,000 as the non-refundable down payment. That's applied to the future purchase price of the property. So now, and they can still afford $1,500 a month, barely, but they're also collecting $800. So what we can do is we can set aside maybe $600 of that $800 towards the future purchase price of that property. So in 3 years' time, they will have built up enough equity to increase the size of their down payment. And instead of having to come up with $1,650, they only need to come up with the difference, which is $850. So all of a sudden, they're able to succeed, which is a fantastic feeling. It makes me a profit as if I'm doing the lease option. It certainly made me feel good as a realtor getting this family into the deal. But as an investor, you could do this for young families as well. So you identify properties that will work with the suited basements, the young families getting into it for a first-time home buyer. You make a win-win situation for yourself and the family. And if they succeed, that's fantastic. You make your profit, they've got their home. Now, if they fail, you got to look at the realistic side of this as well. If they happen to fail, they through no fault of yourself, and you've pre-qualified them so that they should be able to qualify, but things happen, and if they fail to qualify, then it's still not a bad deal because you're going to have excellent cash flow, plus you're still going to own a cash flowing property at the end of it all because you'll have a tenant in the basement, and you can simply turn around and do another lease option with somebody else or sell it to a family as well. So again, it's just a different way of looking at things. Take a challenge for many people and turn it into an opportunity for yourself and a solution for the young family. Now, let's take a look. Let's say that you have a condo or an underperforming house. What are your options? Well, the obvious option is simply sell it, but you could also do a lease option, or you could do a hold where you hold the lease option itself. Assign the lease option to somebody else, like create the lease option, put somebody in it, and then assign the lease option to somebody else. You could also sell the property with a vendor take-back second mortgage, where they may not have enough of a deposit, so you help them with the deposit because they can't, they may need to put 15, 20, maybe even 30% down. So what you could do is have a second mortgage of 10, 15, 20% to make up the difference, to make it affordable for them. You could also create multiple mortgages and then turn around and sell these vendor take-back mortgages to other investors so that you get your money out of the deal. We're going to talk in more detail about that whole process of selling mortgages because it in and of itself is a different strategy. Now, what if you happen to have an eightplex that's barely cash flowing? Well, first of all, I would hope that if you're one of my students, you won't be buying an eightplex that's barely cash flowing, but perhaps you already bought one that is barely cash flowing. You realize, oh, I paid too much for it. Well, again, you can simply sell it, but the chances of you selling it for what you paid for it or any more to make a little bit of a profit on it is slim to none because nobody else is going to buy a property that doesn't cash flow. Again, you could sell it and you could make it attractive to a potential buyer by holding a vendor take back, or you could do a lease option where you lease option the property to somebody else so that you make it attractive. You get rid of your headache. You make it attractive enough for them to buy it from you, and they will then put the work and effort into turning the property around, managing it. Maybe it's a long distance management issue for you. So you find somebody local that's willing to buy it, but they can't afford to buy it, but you do a lease option. Just an idea. You could also look at doing a condo conversion and doing multiple lease options on all of the units. So you can actually, if it's practical, go through the process of doing the condo conversion and take it from one title of an eightplex to 8 separate titles, 8 condos. You can then do 8 separate lease options. Or you can actually sell 3 of those condo units and hold 5, and then they would cash flow. And that's exactly what I've got a note here, BC Developer. That's one of my students approached me, this is several years ago now, and he was a developer, a home builder, and he wanted to build, he had a piece of land, he wanted to build this eightplex. And even though he's a builder and has access to better pricing than the average individual out there, he could not come up with a plan, design, and to build this eightplex to make it cash flow with the current market rents. That's a big challenge we have in building new rental properties. So he was stuck. He didn't know what to do. So what I suggested was that he build the eightplex, but as he's building it, he builds it as, instead of one title property, he builds it as condos. Therefore, he would have 8 condos, and he could then sell 3 of the condos, or however many he wants to sell, but he could sell as few as 3 condos, and the remaining 5 condos would then cash flow because he could take the profits from those other 3 sales to pay down the debt. So he'd have a much smaller debt servicing on that property, and therefore it cash flows. He could also sell 6, 7 of those properties and just hold one free and clear. And that one unit that he's holding free and clear would be 100% cash flow because there'd be no debt service on it. So that might be a better option as well. There's just, again, different ways of looking at it. Now, my mentor, when I went through the real estate course, the education program, part of the deal was I had a mentor. And the mentor would come out and he would spend 3 or 4 days with us, go around, look at properties, apply the knowledge that I learned during the courses. And what he did was he shared with me a story of another student that he had. And what this was, it was an opportunity. His student, he went out to mentor the student, and the student was very excited to see him because he had just completed an assignment contract. And he made about $30,000 on this assignment contract. So, of course, the mentor was extremely happy for him. And he said, explain to me, tell me what the story is. Well, it was an apartment building that he ended up coming across that needed a lot of work. It was it needed major repairs. A lot of money was going to be required in order to invest into that property. So my mentor listened to the story very closely. Then he said, well, what if? And he started to share with him some different examples. And in the end, the student was very disappointed because he just missed a golden opportunity because all he saw was the one option, and that was to assign the deal to somebody else who had the money, because the student didn't have any idea how he could come up with the money to do the repairs in order to refinance the property and actually keep the property. And in hindsight, he now sees how he could have done that through the guidance of the mentor. So it was a really great story that he shared with me. And it just opens your mind to all of the different possibilities. And simply, instead of saying simply that I can't do it or this is the only option, what you want to start doing is ask yourself, well, how can I? You then go outside of your own little world and you start asking other investors, I've got this opportunity. How can I take advantage of it? How can I leverage this opportunity? And that's where your mastermind can come into play as well. So, what if, for example, you had 2 apartment buildings? One's a 24 unit and one's a 29 unit. And it's owned by the same owner, so they're to be sold together. Even if you just wanted to buy one, that's not an opportunity. You have to buy them both. The asking price is $4,725,000. Challenge is you have no cash. Well, if you have no cash, what are you looking at it for, right? Well, there's options. There's still things that you can do as an investor because you have the knowledge. You could actually take this and you could assign it to another investor. You could put it under contract, find another investor, and a deal that big, assuming that it's a good price, which in this particular case, it was an extremely good price. And this is actually a deal that I put together. And we ended up purchasing it for $4.7 million. And when I sent it off to the banker to have him just confirm what he thought the valuation was, he said it's easily worth 4.8. So I was very happy with this deal. It's very rare that you can find a deal listed through a realtor that is accurately priced, but this was the case. So I could have just as easily put it under contract for 4.7, and I probably could have found another investor willing to buy it and make $50,000, maybe even $100,000 cash. So that's one option. You could also purchase it with other people's money and doing joint ventures. Or simply just walk away thinking, if only I could have. Now, in the past, I know I have walked away from properties like that. Especially when they were in the $4, $5, $6 million price range, just because they were so far beyond my context at that particular time. As I have evolved as an investor, I realize that 4.725 is no different than $472,000. It's just a couple of zeros, that's all. So just by adding that extra zero on there really makes no difference. It's the same process, it's just more numbers, and you just need to go through the same process, find partners, whatever. So here's what we did. Here's the real deal. So again, once I was presented with the opportunity, you have to analyze it. Is it a good deal or bad deal? And you have to then make an offer to get it under contract. And you have to be really quick about this, because in this particular deal, actually, when it came to my attention, it was, I believe, on a Tuesday, and they were not receiving any offers. No, that's not true. It's not that they weren't receiving offers. They were not doing any viewings on the building until a week later, the following Wednesday. So Tuesday, I get information about the property. I take a look at it. I run the numbers. Wednesday, I write them an offer without even making a visit to the property. I knew where the properties were. I've seen them from the outside, but I've never been into the building themselves. I didn't want to wait for other people to get there and see the property and see how good the properties were, and then get myself into a bidding war. So I made the offer with a very short, irrevocable time. So while I did that, I also did a presentation to my joint venture investors. So I had a group of people already interested in becoming partners with myself, and I was able to raise $900,000 from these investors, which allowed us to go ahead and actually buy the property, because we only needed 15% down. So we bought the property, and I was then able to receive a financial compensation for this. So in other words, I was able to pay myself for putting the deal together. Now you have to be careful, because I'm a licensed realtor, so I can receive commissions, but even if I wasn't a licensed realtor, I would be able to pay myself a fee for doing this. You just have to be careful how you word the fee. It's like a finder's fee. It's you just be careful of the wording. Check with your lawyer how to word that correctly. So I paid myself a fee for putting the deal together, and it was well worth the money that was charged, because there's a lot of work to put these deals together. I also retained 20% equity in the transaction as well, which allowed me then to earn 20% of the annual cash flow, plus I would also get 20% of any future equity growth in the property. So think of it like, in 5 years' time, that property is going to go up significantly. And in this particular market, the appreciation over the past 10 years has been approximately 5%. And 5% of $4.7 million over the next 5 years, my 20% equates to $259,000 in equity. Now that's not cash in my pocket unless we either refinance and or sell the property. But still, that's equity that's coming to me. Now my return on my investment in this particular case is actually infinite, because I have zero money in the deal. Actually, I was paid to buy the deal. So this is the type of thing that I am trying to get you to open your mind to think differently. So you don't necessarily, even if you didn't put this deal together yourself and hold 20% equity, you could put the deal together and give it to somebody else and take an assignment fee of $50,000, $100,000. That property would be well worth a $50,000 assignment fee very easily. If I was an investor, I would pay somebody $50,000 for this particular deal, knowing what it's like. So there's lots of ways for you to make money. It's to, first of all, get the education so you know how to identify a good deal, analyze a good deal, how to structure the deal, put it under contract, which we'll be talking about later as well. Do all of these things, but then you have to take that final step and actually take the action and put it together and bring the willing partners together. This is another strategy that a lot of people are not familiar with, and it's an agreement for sale. So let's say, for example, there's a house and the list price is $320,000, and you're able to purchase it for $305,000 simply because the seller needs $50,000 because they have debt on that property of $255,000. You know that the future value of that property is going to be at a 5% appreciation, worth approximately $370,000. So one option is you could do a sandwich lease option where you agree to buy it from the existing seller, and then you find a willing and tenant buyer who's willing to buy it from you in 3 years. The challenge with this is it can get a little bit messy if it doesn't work out, and especially if the seller needs that $50,000 to move on to another property. So what I suggest you do is use what we call you could also do a purchase lease option, but again, assuming you can't qualify, what I suggest you do then is use an agreement for sale. And this is a written contract, very similar to a purchase and sale agreement. The big difference is that it has a very long closing. So it could have a 3-year closing date for it, but what happens is the title does not transfer until the 3-year time period expires, and there's no going back on it. So the $50,000 I give the seller, he can take that $50,000, he can move on to his next opportunity. However, he can't qualify for a new mortgage. Well, he may or may not be able to qualify for a new mortgage, most likely can't, because he's still on the hook for this mortgage until the agreement for sale comes to fruition in 3 years' time. But I don't have to go out and get conventional financing. I could get the $50,000 cash from a joint venture partner. We go together, give the $50,000 to the seller. We then do a lease option on the property. So it's similar to a sandwich lease option. If the deal works out, then that's fantastic. And if the tenant buyer decides to walk away for whatever reason in the end, well, that's okay too, because we've got a property that has grown in value by $65,000 plus the tenant deposit that we collect. We would hope to collect $10,000 to $15,000. So we can either do another lease option, or we can simply sell the property at a discount and make some profit on it as well. So it's just another form of controlling a property, an agreement for sale, which allows you to take possession of the property, control of the property, but you don't gain title of the property. So this is a good alternative to lease options. Then we've got assignments. All right, so let's take a look. If all you have is $20,000 cash, what will you do? Sorry, it's not. This is your assignment, not assignments. This is your assignment or your homework. So what would you do if all you have is $20,000 cash? Well, what I've done is I've given you 2 different scenarios. I've attached a worksheet. It's called What Are My Options for This Property? And this is out of my workbook that I used to use for the program that I taught when it was a weekend program. So it's a chapter called What Are My Options for This Property? And on page 8 to 12, there are 2 different scenarios. So take a look at the 2 different scenarios, and you'll discover that there's enough information provided. However, you're still going to need to make some assumptions. So I'm sure that you have seen many listings, and there's not enough information provided to you to make a decision. So what you do is you contact the realtor and you ask for more information. You get a little bit. You ask for a bit more information. You get a bit more information. Also, that you're doing all of this so that you can make an informed, educated decision as to whether you're going to buy the property or what you're going to do with that property. In the meantime, somebody like myself comes along, and I'm going to take a look at that exact same property, and I'm going to make assumptions as to what the expenses are, what the income is, and I'm going to do my analysis based on these assumptions to determine whether I'm going to do a buy and hold, or maybe I'm going to do a buy, fix, and sell for the property. Maybe I'll assign the property, or I'll do a lease option. I don't know. It all depends on the numbers. But this is how I look at each and every opportunity to see whether there's something I can do with that particular property. Now, it doesn't mean that every opportunity that comes my way I'm going to look at and come up with a solution, as to what I'm going to do with that property. More often than not, probably 90% or 95% of the deals I look at, I just say, no, I'm not interested. It's the 5% that I will potentially do something with, whether it be buy and hold, buy, fix, sell, assign, or lease options. So that's what you have to do. Are you going to buy and hold it, buy, fix, and sell, assign it, lease option, or simply just walk away from the deal? So again, on the attached worksheet, pages 8 to 12, there's 2 different scenarios. Go through the information, use the spreadsheets that you've been provided with in the program already, and determine whether with each scenario, are you going to do a buy and hold, buy, fix, and sell, assign, lease option, or simply walk away. At the beginning of our review next week, what we will do is we'll go over the assignment. We'll also go over the other lessons as well, and then open it up to Q&A for everybody as well. So make sure if you have any questions, please send them ahead of time so that I have an opportunity to look at them and not necessarily structure an answer, but just organize the answers so that they make more sense for everybody. If you don't have time to do that and you want to ask your question live during the webinar, that's fine as well. And have fun with that exercise of 2 different scenarios. Don't get, you'll get frustrated. Don't worry about it. Make some assumptions. There's no right or wrong. Have some fun with it. This is how you learn. Once I share with you what my insight is, you can go back and you can look at them again and practice going through the process again. All right. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the live webinar call next. Take care.